So, Carolyn, why don't we start off by telling me how you found out about this case, this particular story?
Well, I've lived in the Pacific Northwest pretty much all my entire life, and I'd never heard of Warren Forest. I live near Seattle, so probably about 3 hours away from Clark County, which is where this investigation takes place, these crimes take place. And so once I heard about Warren Forest, and then I heard about Norma. She was 15-year-old girl in 1974, and she was abducted by this guy driving this blue van, and she was sitting on the side of the road, and he asked her if he could give her a ride home, and at first she said no, but then she said yes, and it just started this whole abduction, tying her between two trees, punching her in the face, and he left her in the woods and basically like, don't go anywhere. I'm coming back. And if you go, it's going to be worse for you. And so she literally chewed through her bindings to escape. She hopped through the woods, bunny hopped to this field, was there overnight, heard him come back. He didn't find her, thankfully. And the next morning, she hops to what it was as a maintenance building. And a worker there saw her 5 a.m., this little girl, 15 years old, but very, very tiny, sitting on the stoop. And the police were called, and her story wasn't believed, you
Mm.
know? And when I heard that, and then when I saw the pictures of what she looked like, rope burns on the side of her face, on her wrists, on her ankles, just she had looked like she'd been through a horrific ordeal. He punched her in the eye, and her literally the white of her eye was completely red.
Mm.
And so that's how I learned about the story. Was first my shock and then anger that she wasn't believed, and I wanted to know more. And then I met Star, who, to understand this investigation, you got to start at the beginning. 1971, December 7th, her older sister, a year older, they were basically Irish twins. She told her it was around Christmas time, like I'm going to school, and they were in foster care, so they were staying with Grace, who's a woman they'd stayed there before, so it was more of a safe space than some of their other foster placements. And she said, "Tell Grace that I'll be coming home, because I only have a couple hours of school that day." And she never returned. And so Star has never given up on finding her sister. And that love for her sister is just, it's heartbreaking, but it's also resilient, inspirational. And she really has been the focal point in terms of keeping everybody together in this investigation by quietly but loudly at the same time too, letting people know that, she wants to find her sister. And even though it's been more than 50 years, she's really galvanized not only searches for her sister's case and keeping investigators on it over all this time, but then also for other victims. And this is a serial killer, Warren Forrest, who's only been convicted of two cases, but he's suspected of many, many more. And there's two young women who, Jamie, who is still missing, and another young woman, 14-year-old Diane Gilchrist. Their remains have never been found, and he is suspected in their murders. And
Were all of the victims teenage girls?
yeah, he had a type, and so they didn't start putting the pieces together until 1976, where so Norma was abducted, tied between these two trees. 2 years later, guess what? 169 feet from where Norma had been tied between these two trees, they found the remains of another victim, a hiker. Her name, the victim was Krista Blake. And so that's kind of what's got him
So
under
she
their radar.
died. She was killed.
She was murdered by him, and he buried her in a shallow grave, and her boot was sticking out, and hikers came upon it, and they were like, "Whoa!" And that started, I mean, not to be flip about it, but that's kind it started the whole thing of identifying Warren Forrest, because before that he was see that's where this gets kind of confusing, where he was convicted of found not guilty by reason of insanity for another abduction and attempted murder, and he was sent to Western State, a mental
Hospital.
facility.
Yeah.
Yeah, hospital. And so then once Krista Blake's body was found, um, they were like realizing, wow, this is a serial killer.
So you mentioned nobody believed Norma.
Yeah.
Did she just, I don't want to say give up, but was she just, well, I guess that's how it is? I mean, and then when these things start to happen later on, a few years later, are people looking at it like, no, maybe you should go back and talk to her because she survived this and was able to get away?
Absolutely. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing, but Norma, after she was not believed, um, dismissed, she went out and she gave this amazing, incredible description. Drives a blue van, good-looking guy, has a mustache, longish, brownish blonde hair. And they never asked, the people at the Parks Department, does this sound like someone you know? Because, I mentioned she was found at the maintenance facility at this Clark County Parks Department. And the deputy never went back and talked to them, but like Warren Forrest worked there. So she was still trying to get them, her and her mother, after in the days following, this, horrific assault and kidnapping, she went to dealerships to try to narrow down. This is what the description of the van is, a light blue. But then after that, she just basically she didn't accept that she wasn't believed, but she was going through her own struggles. Her family life was really challenging, and you'll have to listen to the podcast to get that part of her story. But they ended up coming back to her once they realized a few months later another young woman was abducted, and barely literally crawled out of her grave, and she was believed. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the juxtaposition of how this case, 50 years old, there's just so many, it's a Trojan horse for many social issues that we are still facing today.
Right.
And so that's another point of entry for me of why I wanted to really go deep and long on a case like this, because you can really showcase the injustices, but then also the stories of the people who never gave up, including the investigators, the family members, the victims. It just is a very dark but also very powerful story. And I just feel so fortunate to be able to have the platform to let them find. That's why we called it Stolen Voices of Dole Valley, because these voices have been stolen, and this podcast truly is a platform for people like Norma, like Star, to tell their stories and to have that time and space to be able to really go deep with it.
It's, as you mentioned, it's called Stolen Voices, and by the time people are watching this interview, it's out. How many episodes can we anticipate?
Okay, so we'll drop the first two today, and then it's a 9-part series. We'll also have bonus content, and what we hope is that there's people that will come forward. Maybe there's someone who has information. I mean, there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and the serial killer Warren Forrest is still alive. And so there's been a lot of movement in the investigation since I started working on this. The cold case unit was reinvigorated, and I was able to connect them with Paul Holes, who is a very, yeah, you're nodding, like he's like very that's what's so great about the true crime community is that I see myself as kind of a facilitator. I had worked with him on a couple of other cases, interviewed him. I mean, not working with him, but like talked to him about other cases and connected him with some of the cold cases that I'd worked with in my area, which is something I love to do. I'm not an investigator. I'm not in law enforcement, but if I can connect people, that's a real wonderful thing to be able to do. So when I went to him, Paul Holes, and I said, "Hey, I have this case." And at that time, he's retired. And for those who don't know, Paul Holes, is someone who was critical in solving the Golden State Killer case back in 2018. And that case was the very first case where investigative genetic genealogy really opened opened everything up. It changed everything in terms of crime fighting, how we use DNA to, or how they use DNA to as a crime fighting tool. So he's now working with a company called Othram, and they have the cutting edge in technology and old cases where they think there's no possible way of getting DNA and they're able to get it. So it's a really simplistic way of describing what they do. But now he's helping Paul Holes, Clark County Sheriff's Office, facilitate all this evidence that they have. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, he has helped out on a lot of other cases and has a podcast and has been at CrimeCon and really been involved in this. So you said that the suspect, well, the not the suspect, the person that did this, the murderer,
Hmm.
still
Hmm.
alive. Were
Yeah.
you able to talk with him?
I reached out to him a couple of times. He got back to me and very much was no. But what's cool is that he working with law enforcement in the sense of Clark County Sheriff's Office has been very open to they're like, hey, we need help. And they were very open to working with Paul Holes. They've been very open with discussing the things they can with me about the case because they can see that I've put the time and the energy into it. And the goal is that there's still 5 cases that are they absolutely feel like he is a suspect in these cases that he may have knowledge. So it's kind of a dance of using this media to pressure Warren Forrest into coming clean because he can provide a lot of answers um, to family members and who want to know where their loved ones are, like Star. So to answer your question, um, he didn't respond in terms of giving me an interview, but I feel like he hopefully could respond to helping some of these families get resolution if the right levers are pressed, if that makes
Right.
sense, which we'll talk more about in the show.
Right. Well, and sometimes all it takes is a podcast, a docu-series, a documentary to come out. And once people get talking about it, suddenly there's a surge of tips and information that can lead to, as you said, solutions for these 5 families. And I don't know, do you think there could be more than the 5?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's document, even though he hasn't talked to law enforcement, he's not one of these kinds of serial killers who likes to, talk and talk and talk and give me a cheeseburger and investigators can go back and they'll start talking. He is not the type to do that. He wants to be left alone. So that's why it's been really interesting seeing how law enforcement kind of strategizes. And they're not telling me, really anything more than what the average person is knowing, but just through watching um, kind of how they work and operate and how they're, they've actually tried to kind of work with me to be like, when's your podcast coming out? Because we want to use this to pressure him into like there's going to be a lot of media attention on this. We can make your life more difficult, or we can help. Just to get some resolution for the families. Now, whether or not he actually wants to play ball is still remains to be seen. But I do hope that a lot of people will come out with information that we don't, that because we only have little pieces. And since he hasn't talked, it's hard to put them all together. And because the investigation is, 50 years on, there's a case at that Western State Hospital that I mentioned earlier where he was instead of being, um, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity for one of these abductions after Norma. And he was sent there, he was committed there. And then, like 3 weeks after he was sent there, a patient, young woman, Karen Wiles, who she basically was found murdered 10 miles away on the tide flats. And that case has never been solved. And many of the details of that murder scene fit his MO. So
Mm.
that's another case that we go into, and that's outside of Clark County because Western is a couple hours away from
Yeah.
Clark County, where most of these cases took place. So there's just a lot of moving parts. And, I think that people, like I said, are going to be really inspired by, all the folks that what they've done over all these years is so, so incredible.
Yeah, man, even from the fact that it starts with, I don't want to say the typical kidnap scenario, but in a way it's a stranger approaching someone in a car offering them a ride. I mean,
Hmm.
you hear those type of things. We've seen them in movies, but it's so much deeper than that, as you said, as you've uncovered with all of these victims out there. As you've been doing all this research and putting this together, what surprised you the most?
Just the it has everything that I love about telling stories. you know, um, People who just refuse to give up, the grit, the sense of community that has, you take this really horrific serial killer and what he did and how these victims were dismissed and how it was so confusing and he portrayed himself, as this great guy and family man. And it's like, how they've all these pieces and then the serendipity of things coming together of like, oh my gosh, you know um I'm kind of trying to not give away too much,
Right.
but it's just, I think people are going to be blown away by the stories. And that's what I love about podcasting, because it is, you know, it's been 50 years, and in this case, nobody really knows that much about it. And there's just so many twists and turns. And it's just a real honor to be able to bring it to light. And I absolutely hope that from this, people will come forward, more people will see the importance of believing survivors and victims, like Norma's story is one that once you hear it, it's just, you just can't get it out of your head. And I think at this point, it's just important for people to know that this happened, and that's what I'm excited about, is really showcasing, and then Star, what she's done in this investigation to help not only find her sister, but help other families. Even if she's not finding her sister, it's like, the wind goes out of her sails a little bit, but she was critical in episode 7 in helping to identify the remains of another victim who had gone without her name,
Mm.
whose voice was stolen 50 years ago, and she finally got her name. And that was the case that he was recently adjudicated for in 2023.
Wow.
So there, I believe that there was another victim who was found right by Martha Morrison, Carol Valenzuela. And so there's some van hairs that hadn't been fully tested with today's technology. And so if they can connect him to that case, you know, either he's going to start talking or he's going to go back to Clark County and get away from prison and go to the jail. He's like 75 years old. He does not want to do that.
Right.
So there, when I talked about that pressure earlier, there are some pressure points that might do the trick, but who knows?
Man, it sounds so fascinating. How long have you been
Yeah.
working on this?
I've been working on this for like 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
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 Okay, the
So
name of the podcast, Stolen Voices. Where can people find it?
Stolen Voices of Dole Valley. It's available wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Amazon, Spotify. The first 2 episodes are out now, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode when it comes out, which will be once a week. And then depending on, this is very much a live and still active show, where if people come and talk to us and like, hey, I worked at that Western State Mental Hospital back in 1976, and I have information, because it was a hospital and there's the privacy and for these records. A lot of people weren't interviewed back in the day on Karen Wiles' murder because it was like that investigation was stymied based on not having access to the patients to talk to get more information. So, stay tuned.
Yeah.
This could be a ride.
Okay, I know I have to listen, but I have to ask you
Yeah.
one question. He
Yeah.
has gotten out of that mental hospital.
What?
he must have been released from that
He-
mental
They
hospital.
were going to release him, and then they found Krista Blake's body in 1976. The hospital had already signed off on like, yeah, I mean, he'd been able, he
After
doesn't
three
present,
weeks.
well, no, after like just a couple years.
Oh, okay, okay.
So yeah, so after a couple years, they were like, "Yeah, he's good to go. Let's get this ball rolling," because he had this ability to charm people. And then all of a sudden, they found Krista Blake right next to Norma, and they're like, "Wait a second." So then that's when he was arrested for Krista Blake's murder. But then he's been in prison for like 30 years, but he
Hmm.
hasn't talked. And he was about ready to get out again. And then he was recently, there's all these twists and turns to get him to uh to get this case adjudicated in 2023. So he's not going to get out, right? What we're looking to do now is for these at least five families and for these, to find out, was he the one that did it? And if he wasn't, then who we still need to solve these cases, So lots of twists and turns.
All right, it's going to be a good one. I know it is, and you can
Yeah.
listen to it now. Carolyn, thank you so much for all your work, and maybe we'll have to have you back here in a few weeks. I know we will because I'm going to
Yeah.
have so many
Yeah.
questions after I listen to the whole thing. Like, what about this?
Perfect.
And
Yeah.
maybe this podcast can help get those answers that everybody wants.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope it's the beginning of something really special. And I just have to thank all the people. Like this is me, talking to you right now, but there are so many people, Norma Starr, the cold case unit, all the detectives, the current detectives that have, welcomed me. At first it wasn't a welcoming, but we've gotten to know each other. And like there's just so many people. It's not even anywhere near about me, although I'm the host, obviously. There's just so many people who have played a hand in this. And then of course the producing partners that we have, KSL and Lemonada Media, who are just amazing, amazing partners. So it's been an absolute team sport. So
That's a
thank you
winning
for having
team.
me on.
You get KSL and Lemonada on there. That's a winning team.
That's a winning combination. Absolutely.
And you forgot
No,
that.
no,
Sorry.
no. Great. No, hey, this has been a real treat because I can still hear you saying, where are your children?
Yes, the line that I will always be known for, and I guess there's worse things to be known
It
for.
was the perfect line. It was what everybody wanted to know. So
Yeah.
anyway, great job.